Assemblyman Gallagher, we appreciate the time. Look forward to you coming to Des Moines in January. Kind of fill us in on your background a little bit. Obviously, you're in elective office, but also a farmer. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a sixth generation California farmer. My family, immigrated to this country. They're Irish descent, and ultimately came out to California in 1868. And so we've been farming there ever since. And we grow primarily rice and walnuts in the Sacramento Valley of California. So that's a little background on our family history. I have actually some family from Iowa. My mother was born in Iowa and came out here with her family when she was young. But yeah, so we've been farming in the Sacramento Valley. I'm also a husband and a father of five. My wife and I, Jana, are raising our kids here in California, and so I got into politics. That's about 15 years ago now. First in local government, and then more recently here in the state assembly, and currently serve as our Republican leader in the assembly.
Five kids, that's just for the labor back on the farm.
Yeah, you gotta get them started young, right? But we're right now we're really busy with school and activities with all of them right now. My oldest daughter is really involved with Future Farmers of America. So she's currently serving as a president of the Superior region, here. Vice president of the Superior region up here. And so she's been really active in that organization, which is a great organization for our youth. But they keep us running, that's for sure.
For sure. Before we jump into the issues here, a little political background. You're a Republican and a Republican leader in the legislature, but that makes you in the minority. And historically, that's kind of a position Republicans are frequently in your state. How do you navigate as you have a variety of issues that are important to you as a leader on your Republican caucus? How do you navigate forward, realizing that Democrats have majority control?
Well, it's a challenge, and because there is a very significant difference in viewpoint, between us and the Democrats. Here in California, we certainly think that things are going in the absolute wrong direction. Here in California, so I'd say we kind of play a dual role of, one challenging, the establishment, if you will, in California, and saying, hey, we think we could do better. And outlining our own policies that we think would actually put the state in a better position, while also you have to figure out how to work across the aisle and pass policies that are good for your constituents, that you think are good, strong, responsible policy. So I'd say as Republicans, we do both. We certainly outline where we're different and how we can do things, in a better way. But we also, work across the aisle to, pass better policy that'll be, good for the state. And I'd say a lot of those lines, we try to work on resource issues a lot, like water, for instance, and, regulatory issues that can be a problem for a lot of people. So we look for those opportunities.
Let's really go into this water issue. So back in 2014, this Sustainable Groundwater Management Act that passed and got signed into law in the fall. And, there's not a switch that gets flipped when all of this can get implemented. It's been a years-long process in a variety of ways. As you view this, what is the purpose? And in your mind, how should this play out?
So yeah, this legislation was passed back in 2014, and I would say some really saw it as a compromise. It's a new regulatory system regime for groundwater, specifically pumping of groundwater in California.
Which is
And
super important there, right? When you don't have enough surface water.
it's very important. And I would say there is a many farmers in California that utilize what we call conjunctive use. So they have surface water rights that they use in conjunction with groundwater. And that is actually, especially in the Sacramento Valley where I'm from, has actually been, a very, useful tool to sustain our groundwater. Having surface water resources, for us has meant that we've had, pretty stable groundwater, in the north in the Sacramento Valley. But that's not the case everywhere. And many farmers, especially in the Central Valley, I would say, further south of me, are very reliant on groundwater. And so this system is designed to work that each area will kind of come up with their own groundwater sustainability plan. And then they have to, enact measures to implement that and show the state essentially that they have a sustainable, groundwater system that's going to prevent overdraft and, depleting the aquifer.
And is that the compromise side of this? I think from afar, as we look at your state, it's this humongous geographic state. And while maybe on the national news we hear about, areas that have dealt with drought for a number of years, as you all know, there are other parts of the state in the past year that were just bombarded with rain and had to deal with flooding. So the way this is set up, does it feel to you like locals will be able to devise whatever the plan is for their own needs? Is it adequately set up?
Well, that's, that was the compromise. It sort of kept, the state water resources control board from sort of directly regulating people's groundwater. And so I think a lot of people saw, benefit in that it would be more locally controlled and locally governed through these groundwater sustainability agencies, local ones. But the requirements are pretty stringent. And so when you're going to implement those plans, in many places, it means that people are not going to be able to use as much groundwater. It makes that use much more expensive. And in farming, every cost driver, impacts you. And we live on thin margins, like farmers throughout the United States. I think just in California, it's almost on steroids with the amount of different costs and regulatory requirements that we have to meet. So, I think having the ability to kind of locally drive it has been good, but there are still some pretty onerous requirements. And, I would say, especially in the Central Valley, what we're seeing right now is the potential for a lot of fallowing of ground because they won't have the water resource to farm those properties. And even in the north, it's becoming more cumbersome, to meet all of the requirements. And then you could talk about a lot of other, labor costs. Electricity costs is so much greater here in California. So, all of our power costs have gone up substantially. So when you put all those things together, it's making it, much harder to make everything work.
From a practical standpoint, how do you view longer term? Are you going to see some producers have to just completely change their game plan and switch to other crops because of this?
I think we could see that. The other thing to point out about California is when it comes to water, it really is feast or famine. And that's how it has been historically. Since the beginning of California, we've had, years where we have so much water and massive flooding, to years where we have drought and very little water. And that's why it's always been important to invest in water infrastructure. So we as Republicans and a lot of the agricultural community have really stressed the need to improve our water infrastructure, more reservoirs, more ability to move that water and make the most of when we get those wet years to store that water and have it for the dry years. And the reality in California is under the governance of the Democratic supermajority, they haven't made those investments. I mean, not since the 70s have we built a new reservoir in this state, and it's had devastating impact. So when we hit those dry years, we just don't have the infrastructure to really store that water and make it available, throughout the state. That's probably the biggest problem that we have. Farmers are innovators, this, and we find ways to adapt and to the different things that that come to pass. And so you're seeing that. I mean, we're trying to find different ways, creative ways to get the most use out of our water. You have seen people, revert to like drip irrigation, in orchards, for instance, to help maximize that water. But that can also have an impact on your ability to recharge the aquifer. And so people are coming up with innovative ideas on how do we flood like smaller basins to recharge that water back into the aquifer. So we're trying to find different ways to get through this, but the fundamental reality is California needs to make greater investments in water resource infrastructure. They haven't in decades. And so we've been really pushing to make those investments, new reservoirs, new systems to make sure that we can maximize our water.
Everything's going back on the farm for you. You're in the walnut business, man. That's a tough way to go. Right now, really, the nut business, in a variety of ways, a variety of forms here has been so tough. What's it like for you right now?
It's very tough. We are currently trying to figure out how do we get through these tough years. Obviously the commodity price has dropped so low to record lows. Our costs have only gone up. And, there's a lot of walnut growers, including myself and my family, that we're trying to figure out, hey, can we find ways to get through this tough time and hope that the commodity price goes back up? And, for us, I mean, rice has been better. And so that's kind of helped balance that out a little bit. If you're diversified, that can help. But the fundamental problem right now is the price of walnuts has been very depressed. And we really think you need regulatory relief to actually make those costs, to lessen those costs on farmers so they can get through this. There's a potential for, and there has been some USDA support, mostly through loans. But when you already have loans and you're struggling to figure out how to get through that, more loans isn't necessarily a great answer. So I think, again, our farmers are innovative. They're finding different ways to lower costs and get through this tough time. But if you're in the walnut business, you're losing money, and there's no way around that right now. And so our biggest hope is that we can find different ways to get that commodity price back up so that we can get through it. Otherwise, you could see, and this is my biggest concern, is we could see, a lot of farms going under. And that's not good for certainly the farmer, but it's not good for the world, because California is the breadbasket of the world in many senses. We grow a whole diversity of crops here that the world really depends upon. It's not everywhere that you can grow these crops and get this kind of nutrition, and so it really is a problem for the world, not just for localities.
Where would you be without the rice?
I think we'd be in a really dire situation. Yeah, I mean, if we didn't have profits on that side, kind of helping balance out the losses, we would be in a much more precarious situation. And farmers I know that are completely in nuts, almonds and walnuts, are definitely trying to figure out how to, balance that, how to, maybe restructure loans, working with banks, working to try and get as much, relief that you can get out of the USDA, some of the different recent programs that have come out. That's kind of what people are struggling through. And honestly, I think if we have another year like this one, or or like the past two crop years we've had, I think we're going to see a lot of growers be looking at the prospect of, having foreclosures on their land, maybe just getting rid of the orchard and moving to different crops. But that's not a real great answer either, because there's a lot of investment that has to go into moving over to a different crop, and you're losing that vital investment. So it's very dire. It's a very dire situation. A lot of people pulling their hair out, trying to figure out what is the next step.
More broadly, I've heard you use the word sustainability a few times, and every industry is trying to figure sustainability going forward, right? What is as a state leader, how do you view sustainability? Would you prefer it that it's voluntary, it's the local producer figuring out what is best for his operation? What's the state's role? What's the federal role in this, making a bigger plan going forward?
Yeah, I mean, first level, I'd say farmers are sustainable. They're probably the most sustainable people, the most sustainable industry, I would argue, on the planet.
By necessity?
Yeah, out of necessity, because we make decisions on what to plant based on, the soil type that we have, the water resource that we have available, the markets, and costs. I mean, it is very much a market driven decision and a resource driven, decision. And so I think what we've seen in the agriculture sector is, people go and they plant the crops that make the most sense for that land. And when you start mandating what it should be, I think you really fundamentally mess that up. So I don't think we should ever get in a situation where we're telling farmers, this is what you should grow, on this land. We're really the better stewards of that. And I think you've seen farmers be very innovative, and you've seen them do different things to, decrease tillage, for example, or, find ways to deal with byproducts off the land in a more efficient way, find new markets. And so to me, like, we've actually been the better stewards, of our resources. And so I really, kind of get a burr in my saddle when I talk about, when I hear government starting to talk about how they're going to dictate, what farmers should do. Like I said, in our water situation in the Sacramento Valley, we've actually been very good stewards of our groundwater, and have in many, and I would say most of the valley, pretty sustainable groundwater. And we kind of feel like, why should we be punished, when we've actually been very good stewards of the water resources that we've developed and sustained over time.
Well, we appreciate the time today and look forward to hearing much more conversation from you at the Land Expo in January. Appreciate it. Thank you much.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, and looking forward to it.